Okay. This week on HAF Reacts, we're doing something a little bit different. I realize we haven't done that many to actually start doing something different, but we had a gala this week and we had all sorts of Q&A questions come in, but we didn't get to them all. So we thought we would just go through some of those. The first one, I'm just going to read off. We got a spreadsheet and stuff. It just says, Namaste, could you please share the recording of this whenever available? Yes, we are going to do that.
It's
Actually,
done.
Raj is saying no, but you missed the Slack
No,
on. We're sharing it. It's going to go out on YouTube at some point. So
It's
it's
already out.
live.
It's already
it
It's
out.
is.
live.
It
It
is
is
okay.
live.
I'm behind the
You're
times.
behind on your inbox. It's out.
Fine. The other one, and this is just also housekeeping me. It says Matt's microphone is a little low and hard to hear. Could the volume there be turned up, please? That one was done on Zoom. If we were doing it on Riverside, like we're doing this, they behind the scenes they could have turned it up, but on Zoom you can't. This time I did. That was user error. It's all down to me. I forgot I have a volume button on it, and it was low. Can you all hear me now? We good?
I think we can hear you.
Okay. In which case, let's go and start with Samir. I think you can answer some of these. Could the CIA be backing the Khalistanis?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure that there's definitely some plausibility there. I mean, I think there was some. I remember when I was in college. This was back in the late '90s, early 2000s. That there was. I read some publications about how there were actually Khalistani training camps in, I think it was like Virginia or somewhere in the U.S. set up by the CIA. Now, whether how much that is, how much validity there is behind that, but I've definitely read that multiple times, and that was the first time I heard about that.
What year was that?
This had to be late '90s, like '99-ish, 2000, probably
So
around
when
that
India
time.
was still in the we're super neutral camp, and it's plausible the CIA was saying.
Well, that's when I read about it, but the
Oh.
literature could have been, I think, was referring to this happening in the '80s, like during the peak of it, when U.S. and Pakistan were obviously, very close, had a very close relationship, et cetera, and where the Khalistani movement was at its peak, and where there was much more activity here in the U.S. in terms of providing material and logistical support through fundraising amongst the pro-Khalistani groups here in the U.S. So that was kind of at its peak, and so I definitely think that there was a certain history that likely pointed towards that. Whether it's happening now, I don't know. Although it's certainly plausible, could be. These things are always used for leverage. When you have people that are pro-Khalistanis invited to the White House at the end of the Biden administration, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
I think it's kind of funny that activists, well, at least in the activist circles, there are rumors or allegations of, Khalistani characters being Pakistani agents, those who are opposing the movement being Indian agents, and now this CIA thing. I mean, if there were ever a transnational movement, it would be the Khalistani movement, considering all the different governments that are accused of having a hand in it. So it's funny
Yeah.
that the TNR bill was actually targeting people who were crying foul about that
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. role in that is, less known, or it's less concrete, but the Pakistani role is absolutely
Yeah.
concrete, and that has been extensively documented and written about.
What is it
by
called? They're
journalists.
KK something, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
Kashmir and Khalistan.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. This was post 1971 when the Bangladesh genocide and Bangladesh Liberation War happened, and Pakistan wanted to extract some type of revenge for India's intervention to help Bangladeshis.
Okay, well, we'll get another Pakistan-related question here. Sorry, Raj, just weigh in on this, but we'll go to you first. In regards to the caste system allegations in California, wasn't that determined to be the work of ISI influence? Raj, you're Mr. Paper Trail at HAF and looking into things. What do you know about this? Anything?
I mean, honestly, this is not really the most fun truth to hear, but a lot of people are dumb enough to do activism for free without state support, whether they're on, the HAF side or the other side. Some people are just true believers, who knows? I don't think you need the ISI of Pakistan to launch caste discrimination cases in California. I think there are plenty of people who have all sorts of reasons to do it themselves. But if a dossier from Islamabad comes out saying that, we hired some firm to mess with Cisco systems and Indian people to stop caste discrimination, then sure, then eyesight did it. But until
What
then, I think
actually, Raj, what was some of the Chinese chatter you were hearing kind of in the peak of Cisco and even CSU, Cal State University,
yeah.
and kind of that height of the caste activism? What were some of those things? Because I thought that was
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
fascinating.
absolutely. Like, so that Cisco case created a lot of international headlines, and it was definitely covered in China a lot. I mean, I saw a lot of articles in WeChat, which is the prime. It's kind of like the WhatsApp type app in China, but also has a lot of other news and other platform on it, and they extensively covered it. It was to the point where even one time I was at dinner in a Chinese restaurant, and I walked in, and there was a group of Chinese speaking people who started talking about Polaman, which is Brahmins, and talking about the caste system when they looked at me, and which was very interesting. And also in my prior life, working for China-based companies, I have been asked following that Cisco case. Some coworkers did ask me about it. They asked me if I was Dalit. They asked me about the castes of other South Asian people that we were interacting with, and yeah, I mean, there's a whole like discourse about it because in one way the way it's kind of seen as India is sort of a contrast to China in the sense that China has a largely Han population and they don't have caste, which they note. They adopted Buddhism, which they say doesn't have caste and has been thoroughly sinicized. And India also represents bad governance, while China represents good governance. India represents an incoherent nation that's constructed by the British, which is kind of generally the impression there. Whereas China is a natural nation, which is now undergoing the great ethnic rejuvenation and the Chinese dream.
So, Raj, how long did you let those people talk about in Chinese, about Brahmins, about you, before you let on that I can understand everything you're saying?
And
Well,
speak.
in the in that situation, I was really tired, and I was just like, I just started talking in English to my friend about like, oh wow, caste must be a really interesting topic in China. And then they stopped. I mean, the fact that I even know a lot of what these terms are in Chinese kind of goes to show like how, frequently they were used in conversation. And, like the first and actually not the first, but, it's definitely very interesting being asked if you're Dalit, which is Chinese for Dalit at the workplace and asking it's just not really something you think to discuss when you're talking about manufacturing.
Okay. Well,
So I think that brings up the inevitable question, though, which is, Roger, are you a Chinese spy?
I have gotten more money from CCP linked entities than I have from any of the Indians. So, you be the judge for yourself.
Oh man, that's funny. That's though, I think to the point that you raise, I think it's less about whether some issue or initiative is distinctly linked to a foreign government, but they certainly play them up, right? So to kind of going back to the question about whether the Pakistani ISI was involved in the whole caste issue in California and Bill SB 403, I think they definitely took advantage of the narrative and probably online helped to foment a lot of the hatred towards Hindus, which they have always been very active on. And they're very good at information warfare in general. And so a lot of those talking points about Hindus being casteist, oppressive, Hindu supremacists, etc. Pakistanis, their information, their ISP, I think it's called, which is the military's, information PR wing. I'm sure that they've kind of engaged in a lot of that and perpetuating that narrative online.
Well, and even the entire
Yeah.
premise of trying to implement caste policies here is importing um, political grievances from India to the American context and trying to and you see all the language, right? Like when what's her name, Kshama Samant, pushed for caste policy in Seattle, anyone who opposed it was a right-wing Hindu or a Hindutvavadi or whatever. So um I don't think you need to have necessarily. I mean, is there foreign um involvement in some ways, yes, because the actors that are bringing these things over are very much vested in certain political outcomes in India. But I don't think the ISA, I agree with Samir, doesn't need to be involved for it to harm Hindus, which is what it was going to do.
Okay,
One thing I will
go ahead.
say about China real quick is, I've talked to many Chinese people over the years, and a lot of them are very familiar with India. And I will say that many times when I have spoken to Chinese who do say they know something about India, they actually know. They can recite facts. Like I've talked to people who can even go down to the number of tanks or the number of agricultural projects in Madhya Pradesh or whatever. And so they're very well read, but what they're reading are things from Indians. So when you hear, so a lot of times when I talk, the perspective I hear is like, yes, there is, a perspective that, if you come from a Chinese civilizational background, you look at India, you're going to think of a lot of things. Like even for me, like if I think in that mindset, there are impressions of India that I can empathize with that they have. But a lot of the contents are actually coming from Indians themselves, right? A lot of the news stories I read in Chinese media are essentially no different than what you'd see in the BBC. So again, it kind of goes back to what are we saying about ourselves?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something slightly more positive or countering some of those misimpressions, I guess. Question: do we have grants and programs sponsored with federal/state dollars that can educate the average American on the peaceful assimilation and contributions of the Hindu community in the U.S.? I can't speak to the grammar of some of that, but it's a very good question. What federal, state dollars, grants, programs are out there? Anything we can share with people?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot around, I mean, I don't know if like assimilation, but there's definitely a lot around like temple safety and security, those types of grants, and those are available both at the state as well as the federal level. And those are actually ones where I think our community has really not taken advantage of the amount of money that's out there. And they involve kind of providing, basic security checks, doing assessments, having providing money for the temples themselves to go in and kind of after those initial assessments to basically upgrade whatever security and infrastructure that they need to. So there's a lot of that type of money. There's a lot of money for nonprofits also that are working in spaces like addressing civil rights issues, hate, etc. And again, most of these you see both at the local, state, and federal level. You have to have a physical presence in those areas. So if you're doing it at the state level in particular, you have to be operating in a particular state, or if it's a local one, you have to be in that particular jurisdiction. But those are some of the most common ones, and ones that probably our community can and should take advantage of much more.
We're also being roped in where local efforts have received grants to educate law enforcement and do those types of trainings. And so we're being called in and invited to provide law enforcement training. And that's really a great opportunity to, one, talk about what our culture is all about, talk about the realities of our community and also the challenges. And so those also present a really good opportunity to tell our story on our own terms, and also it having a direct fruit from that effort. And that is that our communities, the local communities that benefit from law enforcement that better understand who they are going to be better protected and safer.
Okay. I feel like with this next question, we have perhaps milked this one a little bit dry at the moment, but let's close it out. Vance's comments permanently ended my family's support for the Republican Party. Hold forth. Raj, Raj, what was that? But I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good. I think that maybe sums it up, and perhaps we don't need to go into it, but I still want to. I mean, any thoughts on
Well,
that?
I'll say the Hindu American vote is a vote to gain or lose. I just spoke to someone at the New York Times yesterday about this, and I think the last election, maybe even the election before, showed that not only are Hindu Americans kind of situated or residing in swing areas, swing states as well as swing districts, or they themselves made these districts into swing districts. And so where we saw shifts where Democrats had won and their, Republicans won with large numbers of people of Indian origin or Hindu Americans voting there, not both the same. And now we're hearing all these murmurs, right? I think in after the last administration and people getting frustrated, lifelong Democrats getting frustrated with the fact that the higher ups in the Democratic Party were not calling out the accusations or dual loyalty tropes that were being lodged by the progressive wing of that party against Democratic candidates, political candidates like Raja Krishnamurthy or Jennifer Rajkumar, even appointees like Amit Jani. And there were communications going to the very, very top of the Democratic Party, and they were just met with silence and ambivalence. So, you know, that in and of itself, alongside policies like the caste policies that we saw being promoted in California, a blue state, Seattle, even in other states, it was Democrats that were pushing these types of policies for the, politically correct optics of it and ignoring the fact that they were actually calling for institutionalizing discrimination against 1% of the population. So, you saw this shift, and there's other reasons why, just everyday, kitchen table, whatever they call them, issues that prompt a Hindu American to choose between Democrats and Republicans. But we saw that rightward shift. I would not be surprised if we see back to a leftward shift. I think largely our community is strongest if we are just active, regardless of which party we feel a greater affinity towards. Just be active.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're going to see more people from the Indian/Hindu American community, if there was that rightward shift, moving at least to the center, because unless the Republicans get that Christian nationalist, bigoted part of their party in line a little bit, I mean, if that keeps going on, they're going to start hemorrhaging whatever support they gained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say
I
that
mean,
goes actually. Go ahead, Raj.
I don't know. Oh, please.
I think that goes well beyond the Hindu American community, right? And I think the Republicans have actually screwed up a pretty golden opportunity that they had at the beginning of this year, because they put together quite an impressive, I don't want to say rainbow coalition, but, a quite diverse ethnic and religious coalition of people that kind of came and shifted right in this past election. And now they're basically pissing it away because of the rhetoric, the hate that's been unleashed against people. And it's not just Hindus that are facing it, right? It's a lot of ethnic minorities and religious minorities that had come under this tent and under this umbrella. And I think the Republicans are going to become, meaningless if they do this, and they're going to lose the midterms. I think a lot of people that, the person that asked this question reflects not just other Hindu Americans, but a lot of other groups that had moved right in the last couple of years. And so it's really unfortunate, because you want to have robust, diverse voices on both sides supporting both parties, so you can have issues that are not overly ideological and are controlled by a certain dominant interest on either side.
Yeah, I think that I was reading, it was either LA Times or Cal Matters, I can't recall, that there was the rightward shift in the Hispanic community, at least in California. And due to the, bull in China shop, authoritarian, call it what you want, however you want to describe it, ICE raids and approach to immigration reform, stemming the tide of people in, and then, trying to, I don't know, just address it. The Hispanic community is like, that's fucked up. We want a stronger border, and we don't want criminals, but you're going in and arresting people and deporting people and making people's lives hell. So,
I will say a couple things. One is, the vice president and his wife are both very smart people. They went to Yale. The vice president is clearly online a lot. So I would say that whatever's going on, I'm pretty sure that he's well aware of it. And so whatever he has said or has not said, I think that is a decision, and it can be interpreted as a decision. The second thing is, there was indeed a rightward shift among many minority groups. I believe with South Asians, it was South Asian second generation men between 18 and 39, which especially, went rightward in the past election. And what was very interesting is the Manhattan Institute had a poll out the other day, and they were showing that, it was, they polled Republicans, and they said that 52% of respondents said that Indian Americans have generally embraced American culture, values, and way of life, and have been a positive force in our economy and society. And then they also asked GOP voters about dual loyalty, about a variety of ethnic groups, ranging from Arab or Muslim Americans, evangelicals, Chinese Americans, etc. Of those respondents, 27% said that most or all Indian Americans are more loyal to India than they are to the United States, while 35% of Republicans that few or none of Indian Americans are more loyal to India than the United States. So, which goes to say that while there is a lot of noise going on out there, there was a coalition that, shifted rightwards. And so again, it's like, whatever reason that the people at the top are saying or not saying something, if it's based on their impression of what the people want, maybe it's always good to keep, your information current.
Well, that dual loyalty trope is interesting because that is what the South Asian left accuses of any Indian or Hindu American that did vote Republican, that trying to create this like false equivalence between the rise of the BJP in India as the quote unquote right party there. So I think maybe there's some little bit of digging there that we could do because we've talked about this here too, that so many of the tropes that were really being pushed by the South Asian left, you see echoes of that on the right.
Yeah.
And now, they're getting their panties in a bunch on the left because the right has co-opted their narratives, I guess. But it's our fault still.
Everything's our fault.
Of course it is.
Suhag mentioned talking to a columnist at the New York Times. Everyone should, I don't know when the date is on that when it's coming out, but it was a high profile columnist. And we just have a question about the New York Times. I'm going to do this one real fast. What about getting more articles in New York Times or Washington Post, etc., by journalists that understand Hindus? I think the best way, I think on the gala, I said this is a long-term project, changing the narrative on Hinduism and India broadly in mainstream media. But a quick way to do that, you want journalists to understand Hindus. How about Hindus become journalists? It's not the easiest path in the world. And unless you are in the top, 5%, 1%, it's not a very lucrative profession. But you want journalists to understand Hindus. Hindus need to become journalists, basically.
I'd also say we should, these two are the ones that, and maybe you can add BBC to it, like the trifecta of like really bad reporting on Hinduism.
BBC is a bunch right now, totally unrelated to their Hindu Indian coverage, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. But local media, I think we underestimate the power of, because we're looking at the shiny lights syndrome there, but local media is interested in human interest stories. They're interested in what local communities are doing, and that's kind of the heart of the Hindu American community, the things that we're doing, how we're celebrating our holidays, maybe coat drives or whatever that we're doing. Or, there's been a great story about one of our supporters that oftentimes pays off the layaway at like Walmart or wherever every Christmas as a Secret Santa thing. So, or maybe not so secret because the media covered it. But this is, I think, where our lived realities can really get a good audience and a receptive ear. So reach out if the temple is having a program or there's a local dance recital, whatever, reach out to local media, have them cover those stories. They're always looking for something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure I can see the headline, Hindu nationalist dance recital taking place in your neighborhood.
Oh, there's a whole bunch of academic papers on Hindu nationalism and Garba.
Really?
I knew it. I knew it.
Academia.edu must have realized that I'm a Garba freak. So I think I get that particular article hitting my inbox once a week, like clickbait.
What, far-right dancing? What are the sticks used to beat minorities?
Yeah, there's violence, right? It's steeped in
with
violence.
all those bells on our ankles and skirts and all of that.
Oh, you know what would be cool? We should do like Garba, like Dandiya, right? With Modi masks.
I could make
with Modi masks on. We could do like Modi masks.
God. Okay. On a sidebar, like, what is with the masks? What is with the mask? Like, have you noticed this? Like in India, like when Xi Jinping, I remember this first time I saw, like, I don't know if it's the first time, but like 2019, Xi Jinping went to India, to Kanchipuram, right? And there were like all these kids wearing Modi masks, like waving Chinese flags, like greeting him. And I don't like what, like, I mean, And I've seen that at rallies. Like, I mean,
I
is that
don't know.
maybe it's a cultural difference or something? Like, I don't know.
I don't know. Only tangentially related to this is I saw some headline: Indian newsreader gets fired for pronouncing she's name 11. Okay, we only have a few minutes here, and so let's end on a more positive note, I suppose. And I know, Suhag, you've talked about this, you alluded to it. In confronting hate, is one technique perhaps to focus on and speak openly regarding the outstanding experiences all of us have had with the most generous, giving, kind, and helpful Americans, parentheses, often white Christians, such as our teachers, professors, neighbors, colleagues, doctors, nurses, political leaders, etc. I think it is, actually. It's a good technique to share the positive stories that people are doing, and build those bridges. Thoughts? Let's end on a positive note, or am I just letting anybody hang
Yeah,
on
I
that
think this is where our community, in championing the value of humility, which I think is very good. Um, I think we undermine kind of a broader cause. So maybe if people can take on a mind shift to say, okay, I'm not sharing this because from a place of like ego, but you're sharing something good that's happening in the community that you might have done, from a place of supporting the broader community and our story and our safety and our security and the respect that our community as a whole garners. That includes kids in public schools and college students and all of that. Consider it more a service of sharing our story as opposed to looking at it as boasting. Maybe that'll help people get over that obstacle of seva has to be selfless, which it should be,
Yeah.
but
No,
we have to
but
be
even if it's selfless, you can still get some publicity for it. That's different.
yeah.
It's a practical thing. If people don't know what you're doing, they will not support you.
Yeah, maybe we could I think it's interesting because I think needs to be like a regular way to talk about the stuff that we're doing with just in our regular communities. Maybe we could do like a series on like this week in white adjacent Hindu nationalist seva or something like that. Because in that way we share our seva with our fellow nationalists, white Christian nationalists, as being nationalists ourselves, and we have something in common.
We can
and we
call it
are
privilege speak.
yeah. Oh,
Privilege
there we go.
speaks. Yeah, that can be the name.
I don't know. We're digging deep here. Any final thoughts? Before we have those final thoughts, that we have more questions that came in, and apologies if you happen to be at the gala and happen to see this and I didn't get to your question, but we only have half an hour here. That's what we budget for in terms of all our time. Any final thoughts on the gala? Anything else in the news cycle? Anything worth talking about? That's a very resounding silence. Raj? No? Yes?
It's been a hell of a year. It's been very interesting. I think the thing is it really kind of drives home that a lot of times hate, I view it as like a faucet, or like, there's always kerosene. And actually, ironically, I'm going to quote Isabel Wilkerson, our buddy, because she actually had a good point in her book where she talked about sort of the hate, the residing in the permafrost. She was talking about the analogy of like, say, there are a lot of viruses in the permafrost and they get thawed out and then they, circulate. And I think, what we've seen is something very similar. So in the past, a lot of people said, oh, Hinduphobia can't be real. No one hates Hindus. So you're fine. Right. And it's like, yeah, like there weren't enough of us here for people to hate us. Is kind of like my response to that. But it's like, yeah, if I think back to my childhood, where I grew up, like a lot of these things, they never crossed my mind. People were pretty much like, oh, that's what you are? Okay, fine, whatever. And then they moved on. Now, suddenly it's different. And so suddenly, 20 years ago, yeah, celebrating Diwali, Holi, doing like that drum thing and, Copley Square, whatever, like, fine, no one cared, but now they do care. And so it's, things can change, right? And, everyone, and we all go through it. Like, if you really thought that you could come here, become the most successful minority community in the United States and brag about it, and no one would have a problem with it, and no one would try to offer any resistance, I think that's very magical thinking. So we're here, we're dealing with it, buckle up, it's going to be another year. So.
Okay, let's end it there. We will be back next week if there's something funny to talk about or pressing or depressing in the news media. Otherwise, we'll be back for one more episode before the end of the year where I promise we will be funnier, talking about our greatest hits and low points and high points of the year. So
should we all dress up as like elves or Santa and like
elves?
Yeah, because it's almost Christmas.
I think
time.
we
So
should.
that'd be
I
fun,
think
like,
we should wear orange to stay on brand.
Yeah.
have fun, elves.
Doesn't it see him? Didn't he dress up as Santa? Suhag? Am I totally making that? Your husband, Asim.
Oh, I thought you meant Modi.
yes,
Didn't
yes.
Modi and like the saffron elves?
I thought you meant Prime Minister Modi. Yes, he has. My dad used to dress up as Santa. My dad is a thin Indian man, so he would use a pillow, which made for kind of comic relief as his belly. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
I will be in India, I think, at our next reporting. So it'll have a different background.
So you'll be
No
you'll
muddy
be
masks.
punchy from it being.
Maybe I
middle
can
of
see if
night.
I can get a mask. If I find a
No,
mask,
please
I'll
don't.
come with my mask.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't be able to get a Rahul Gandhi mask even if you wanted one. Those won't be available. Nobody's wearing those.
Okay. Let's wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back shortly.
Bye.
Laters.